On August the 22nd, 2019, a brand new entity was added into the game during the first snapshot of the 1.15 update. And this entity was the Humble Bee. Now, bees at first they did receive a lot of criticism. Now with the introduction of the honey block, this has actually died down a bit since it's unarguably one of the best redstone blocks in the game. However, there are still things the bees are missing out on. So in this episode of Let's Add, we are adding 10 new features to the bees and things that they can produce that just makes the game more interesting and creates a bunch of new features for the bees. And my first suggestion would be to change one of the biggest criticisms and flaws that the bees originally had. Now, when they were first released, they were massive. They were bigger than my head, and there was a lot of criticism about this, but Mojang decided that they preferred this size. But I still think a lot of people don't really like that size, and I would tone it down. Now, baby bees are actually this size, they are tiny, and I personally think that better suits the size of the bees in real life. Now, of course, they are a bit bigger than my hand, so it still has that fantasy aspect to it that doesn't really match real life, but it's still a bit closer and a bit more realistic to that. So while it wouldn't change too many features apart from its hitbox size and things like that, I would just personally tone down the size ever so slightly, and another reason for this is because we don't need the baby bees. Now, baby bees in real life are larvae, not tiny versions of bees, and they always remain in the hive. So I personally think we should never really be able to see the baby bees until they are released from the hive. They should stay in their larval form until they exit the hive as an adult bee, which would be this size. Next up would be wax, and this is a pretty cool feature in my opinion, and it's actually one that was originally going to be implemented into the game, but they later decided not to. This was found coded into the game but never actually used as the wax block, and it had this pretty similar texture to this. You wouldn't be able to do anything to this, literally nothing to it. This would be decoration block. However, the wax item that you get for it would be used to make candles. Now, the way you get wax is from smelting honeycomb in a furnace. Now, this is accurate to real life because bees actually kind of use a bit of wax to make the honeycomb they need, so I think it would be accurate to melt it down into wax. Maybe that's not how it works in real life, but I feel like it would be the most normal reason to do it without adding too many new blocks into Minecraft. Now, to make these wax blocks, you just need a 3x3 grid of wax in the crafting table. And to make the candles, you just need a 3x3 grid of wax, but with a torch replacing the second grid. And this would create 3 candles. Now, this is the item for candles. I think it's pretty nice. And you'd be able to place it down, and it would automatically be in its lit form. However, there is also an unlit form if you waterlog it. It will obviously lose its flame straight after that. So this is perfect for interiors. It does let off the same amount of light as sea pickles, so it would work especially well as a land variant of sea pickles, which works opposite in the water, and you can also relight it with a fire charge or a flint and steel if you accidentally waterlog it. My next suggestion would be crystallized honey, and this once again was originally a feature that was found in the game's code. Crystallized honey would be made by hardening honey by heating it in a smoker or a furnace, and while this may be slightly inaccurate to real life, I personally think it would be the most sensible form of doing it in Minecraft. A 3x3 grid of crystallized honey can be used to create a crystallized honey block, and once again, just like things like glass and ice, this is pretty much just cosmetic. You can see through it, it looks good, but apart from that, there's no other use for it. My next suggestion involves honey blocks and pistons. Now currently, if you push and pull a honey block with a piston, you'll be dragged along with it, contrary to the sticky piston having no effect on the player. However, normal sticky pistons push and can't pull you. So why not have a sticky honey piston which can push and pull you? Now this is a pretty wonky way of doing it. It doesn't look too great. I'm obviously just teleporting you when you flick the lever. However, I personally think that if it were to be implemented, the animation would be much smoother and it would have so many cool uses for redstone contraptions. My next suggestion would be a brand new villager, and this would be the beekeeper villager. This villager has a beekeeper's hat, honey stains on him, and also some bee stings on his skin. So that's how you can tell him apart from other villagers. And the entrance would have a sort of a yellow and white, almost parasol kind of thing in the doorway. And the interior would just have a bed, some chests, a crafting table, some flower pots, and also a yellow carpet. Nothing too extraordinary. Then in the back garden there will be 2 bee nests, which will be his workstation. Now he will trade things like flowers, honey bottles, crystallized honey, wax, candles, all sorts of honey based blocks, items, materials, all sorts, and he'll be a really handy villager if you want to get these in vast amounts, or a good way of getting emeralds if you have a bee farm. My next feature involves the cauldron, and as you can see here, this would sort of be how it looks. Now I couldn't really do this too well because Minecraft actually hard codes its colours into the game, which means you need mods such as Optifine to be able to change the colour of it. As you may know, Optifine hasn't actually been released for 1.15, so the best way of doing this would just be by changing the texture, and it doesn't really change the colour of it, which doesn't look too great, but it's the best I could come up with. However, that's beside the point. The point here is that you can fill and remove honey from cauldrons. I personally think this is a pretty nice suggestion. It will just be a quick and easy method to obtain the honey and store it in a cauldron, and it could be useful in storing honey from honey farms. It could be filled with a dispenser maybe. I think it would be a pretty nice feature. Next up we have another mob, and this is the brown bear. Now currently we have polar bears and pandas, but none of these really have too much of a function. And neither does the brown bear, to be honest. It would just be another mob that you can find in taiga biomes, and this little guy will knock down beehives and eat the honey from it. You'll usually find them with 2 to 4 cubs, and most of the time they're neutral to the player unless you get too close to their cubs or attack them first. You can usually find these brown bears if you see an overturned beehive or honey on the ground, because they do like to knock down these beehives and eat the honey. Now, as you saw earlier, I wanted to change the size of the bee to a much smaller size that makes a little bit more sense, but still fits the fantasy aspects of Minecraft. However, I would still keep one bee of this size, and that would be the queen bee. The queen bee would be a colony's way of breeding. Now, if a bee enters a beehive, that starts a brand new colony, and that will become the queen bee. However, if a colony loses a queen bee, another bee will take on its role after a short period of time. Now, when bees collect nectar from flowers to eat, they will also bring a tiny bit of nectar back to the beehive to feed to the queen. Once the beehive has fully filled up with honey, and the queen bee has enough nectar, they will be able to breed, and new bees in their larval form will remain inside the bee nest. Now, once these bees mature and become adults, they will then eventually leave the bee nest and they will become bees themselves. Next up, we have a feature that was suggested by My Name's King, and currently we have a campfire that can be used to smoke out beehives and calm the bees down, allowing us to collect honey and similar things from the beehives. However, My Name's King suggested a smoking sort of gun thing that allows us to smoke out the hives manually without having to transport any campfires around. We just have to right click the bee nests and it will lose a tiny bit of durability, but it allows us to collect honey from the beehives for a short amount of time before the bees get back to their normal state. And our final suggestion was from Just That Finley in my Discord server. Both of these were suggested in my Discord server, which I highly recommend you check out, because while I'm making these videos, if I'd like to implement a few features from you guys, I'll ask you on the Discord server what features you'd like implemented, and I'll often try to implement them if I'm able to. Now this would be a brand new potion, and just ignore the name of this. It will probably be called the Potion of Stickiness or something, but it would use crystallized honey in a brewing stand. When you consume it, you're actually able to climb surfaces such as these, or glide down them as well. This replicates the feature that when you jump down the side of a honey block, you'll also slide down it. This could be a really cool feature for parkour maps, because it would mean you can slide down surfaces or climb up them just with a potion and without the use of ladders or vine. And it wouldn't have the annoying features that occasionally come with the potions of slow falling. You'd be able to use this when and where you like. You don't just fall really slowly everywhere. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. I do hope you enjoyed it. I personally love all of these ideas, and I really do hope they get added at some point in the future. I especially love the candles. Anyway, thank you for watching. Please, as usual, leave a suggestion down below, and please join my Discord server if you'd like to have input into any of these future videos. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.